Are you tired of wasting your day and killing your brain cells with stupid corporate commercial radio? Then you should listen to WRWK 93.9 FM, the Work FM, commercial free, local, non corporate radio, where we don't waste your time with nonsense and product placement. Tune in to 93.9 FM or go to our website, theworkfm.org, to stream our station or look at our playlist and look at the intelligent talk programming that we offer without stupid commercial interruptions.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Lee. This is Ron. This is WRWK, the Work FM in Midlothian, Virginia. It is time for Finding Our Fit. So, without fitting any more of my time in, I'm going to turn this over to the lady herself, the hostess with the mostest, as we used to say, Susanna. Enough silliness on my part, Susanna. Take it away.
Hey, Ron. Good afternoon, everybody. I've always wondered what that term meant, like the most what? I could probably Google that to find the answer. But anyway, it's great to be back on Finding Our Fit with you, Ron, and everybody today. As you know, the purpose of Finding Our Fit is to find our place in our crazy and beautiful world. And in so doing, we will enrich our world and create a brighter future for everyone and everything, especially Earth. And I love that last piece, Ron, about how they were talking about that with Earth.
Yes.
I'm also the founder and executive director of the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, whose mission is also to help us all find our fit through relationship skill education. So I hope you'll come check us out after the show at healingedu.org. We do this program to help us make sense of our crazy and beautiful world so that we can choose for it to feel more beautiful than crazy. Most of us tend to focus on crazy things in our life, forgetting that the flip side has opportunities to find and create beauty and healing. In Finding Our Fit, we focus on that flip side of our challenges, the beautiful side where we can learn and grow, become wiser and more resilient by adopting a healthier relationship with everybody and everything. Challenge and beauty and learning go hand in hand, so why not choose to flip the coin or view the yin to the yang and enjoy the benefits of that beauty and growth and wisdom? It's a practice we choose every day. Today's topic involves the process of how to turn that crazy into beautiful. Oftentimes, that process involves that inner transformational journey that Joseph Campbell, who was a comparative mythologist, told us about in the concept of the hero's journey. According to Campbell, the hero metaphor is important not only in mythology, but in our modern lives. And the hero, or the shiro, if we want to be more inclusive, may initially perceive to be that challenge as being external, like an external bad guy or gal, like Darth Vader or the Wicked Witch of the West. But eventually, the shiro realizes they have to go on an inward journey to transform and become bigger than the challenge itself in order to prevail. So this is one of those challenges where if we find the courage to do that important inner work in our shadow or the yin, then we can heal, uncover wisdom, and other treasures. This topic today is one of those treasures, or potentially is, should we choose to pursue it. It's about self-forgiveness. We previously talked with the esteemed Professor Everett Worthington on forgiveness, forgiving others, back in January. And we are, again, so fortunate to have our friend of Finding Our Fit, Dr. Everett Worthington, back with us today. He's Commonwealth Professor Emeritus to talk about this idea, this idea of self-forgiveness. So we will talk about what it is, why it matters, and how to do it. In this topic, the long, hard road. So you can imagine it's not easy. The long, hard road towards self-forgiveness with our friend Everett Worthington. Ev, welcome back to Finding Our Fit. It is always just a joy and a pleasure to have you. And thank you for coming back on with us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I always enjoy talking with you. You have good questions and just a good analytic mind. So I'm glad to be here to share what we have.
Well, I am so glad that I have that on recording, that the esteemed Professor Worthington said I had a good analytical mind. So thank you, Ev, for recording that for posterity. So
Yes, that plus $4 gets you a big coffee someplace.
Yes, and unfortunately it is gone up to $4. So before we dive into this really important topic, Ev, could you just give everybody listening a little reminder about yourself? You always undersell it, but I'll let you begin, and then I can, put it into the proper, laudatory context.
Well, I'm a retired professor in psychology at VCU. I spent 40 years here, and I continue to do research. As I like to say, my salary has retired, but I have not. So I'm continuing to just have the privilege of working with bright folks all over the world to find more about forgiveness in its various forms, and also couple relationships and religion and spirituality, the way that they interact with those two. So that's what I do. I'm married to my wife Kirby, 51 years, and
Amazing.
And then we have 4 adult children who keep me in line. And I study humility, and so this helps. So so that's really kind of where the essence of my life is in being in relationship with God and with the people that are close to me. I also play pickleball.
It's a great acclaim there as well.
Yeah,
almost as well known on the course as you are in the academic literature and around the world for your research. And I think what's really just, not only are you just such an incredible scholar, Ev, but you practice what you preach, and and that's rare these days in and out of higher education. So always a pleasure. So this is about self-forgiveness. So can you tell us what self-forgiveness is about, Ev, and how it differs from forgiveness?
Sure. Well, self-forgiveness, of course, is one type of forgiveness. So other types are like receiving forgiveness from God or from something that people feel is sacred in their life, like humanity or nature. And self-forgiveness is like that because usually we're coming at the forgiveness as someone who is seeking forgiveness. But there are 2 other types of forgiveness. One is forgiving other people, and that's usually when we feel that we've been hurt or injured or victimized or wronged in some way. And also a societal type of forgiveness, which is, when a person who has the authority to do so makes some kind of statement about wrongdoing, and whether it's about forgiving or seeking forgiveness as a result of what was done. So so that's what self-forgiveness is. It's one type of forgiveness, and it's very hard, I believe, hard to say which is harder, forgiving other people or forgiving ourselves, but because it depends on the nature of the injury or the wound or offense that we're dealing with. But I think most people would say self-forgiveness is more straining to them than forgiving other people. And I think there's some good reasons for that, such as with trying to forgive ourselves, we are actually playing 2 roles at the same time. We are both the person who did wrong or feels wrong and is wanting forgiveness, and we are also a wrongdoer because we probably did wrong. So so we're granting forgiveness and seeking forgiveness at the same time, and that's a juggling act that in forgiving other people, we're really only in one position at a time. So I think it is a long, hard road sometimes to forgiving ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And so is it harder because we're playing both roles? Like if we're good at forgiving others, do we tend to be better at forgiving ourselves, or do they not necessarily align that way?
Yeah, I think they're pretty independent of each other. So some people, there is a certain relationship between forgiving others and forgiving ourselves, in that people who ruminate a lot, who play things, the bad things that happen in life over and over and over again, they tend to have more trouble forgiving others and forgiving themselves, just because they're keeping the wound green, so to speak. But apart from that, I would say that mostly, some people can be very good at forgiving others and just beat themselves up regularly. Others are, you know, um, generous to themselves and, hard on others. So there's a kind of not a consistent correlation or relationship between those two.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So um, what so it has these two parts, and it can have pretty negative impacts on us if we are unable to forgive ourselves. Is that right, Ev?
That is definitely true. So I like to think about it more in terms of struggling with self-condemnation than I do about self-forgiving. Just because there are a lot of ways that we can deal with our own self-condemnation. When we condemn ourselves and are really down on ourselves, it's a very stressful thing, and so that is going to have a lot of negative effects in our life. It's going to affect our relationships. It's going to affect our mental health. It's going to affect our physical health, and it may even affect our spiritual health. So, so there are a lot of costs to self condemnation, especially if it's chronically, if we chronically engage in self condemnation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's interesting you use this term self-condemnation. So you might have brought that up in the forgiveness show, but I don't recall. What's the difference between? I guess that's the. I mean, is that same? Is that similar with condemning others, and that forgiveness? I mean, is that, or is that unique to self-forgiveness?
Well, of course, if someone hurts us, we can engage in a lot of blaming and shaming of other people. So we're condemning others in that way.
Okay.
But I think when we're struggling with self-condemnation, usually we're down on ourselves, we're condemning ourselves, usually because we feel that we've done something wrong, something that violates our moral standards. Now, sometimes we get down on ourselves not because we did anything wrong, but because we feel like we're not measuring up to the place where we'd like to measure up to. So, there's not a wrongdoing there. It's more like a wrong being, where I'm not acting as well as I would like to, even though I'm behaving morally. Uh, so a person could get very down on themselves, for example, because they don't score as high as they would like on a standardized exam. or they don't get as good a grades as they would like, or they don't get the promotion at work that they would like. And, so they may feel down on themselves because they're not meeting a benchmark that they've set for themselves, even though they're not feeling that they've done something morally wrong.
I see. And then we could also do that with others as well, right? And then need to forgive that too. Like, oh, my child didn't get the grades, I need to forgive them. So that can really apply to others as well.
I like to think that, but I would have to say in the literature, there are people who disagree with that. They say forgiveness is really only appropriate if a moral wrong has been done, that something else is needed. Maybe I need to absolve my child, or maybe I just need to stop blaming my child. But it's not truly forgiveness unless it's a moral wrong. But, I think, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, I'd call it a duck. And, sometimes it feels like I need to forgive my child. And so if I feel like I need to forgive, whether they've done something morally wrong or not, then I think we can work through the decision to forgive and an emotional change that comes from forgiving.
So we're WRWK 93.9 FM. I'm Susanna Calvert here on Finding Our Fit, here with Dr. Everett Worthington, talking about the long, hard road towards self-forgiveness. And we would love to hear from you callers. If you have any questions or comments or observations, give us a buzz at 804-464-1089. Or if you're on Facebook Live, then feel free to put something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So Ev, you mentioned that self-forgiveness is more straining than forgiving others. And I'm assuming it's because of that we're playing both roles of forgiver and the one who's created the infraction. But then it sounds like there's also this non-moral injury territory. So it seems like it could be like triply hard.
I think it is. It is a struggle for a lot of people. Although, as I mentioned before, some people, it's just like, whatever, I'm over this. And so they don't really struggle with it. But when we struggle, we often struggle a lot with self-condemnation.
And is the main, I don't know, trait of people who struggle with self-condemnation, is it people that ruminate?
I think that's one of the biggest. I think there are other traits that come into the picture. There's a trait that's called neuroticism. That's an old term. It basically means emotional reactivity. So if I'm a person who reacts emotionally to whatever happens versus someone who is very low in that emotional reactivity, well, clearly I'm going to get much more upset about things. And then the other trait that probably comes in there is agreeableness. If I'm kind of agreeable and nothing bothers me, then wonderful. I often don't get bothered by what I do or what other people do. And then conscientiousness is going to have an impact, especially on some people, especially if they're like overly conscientious. So, or I don't want to say overly, if they're highly conscientious, so that they're really trying very, very hard. And so their standards are very high, and therefore they have a risk of not meeting those standards quite as often. And that's going to lead to more self-condemnation. So there are quite a number of traits that are mixed in together.
Okay.
And, rumination is certainly one of those.
And these are from the 5-factor model, right? So those are considered to be fairly fixed personality traits. Is that correct? Or can we modify them?
Yeah, they are traits, but we can modify them. And so, and traits change over the lifetime. So almost everybody can think of how you're in college or the college years, and whether you feel like it or not, you're really, you know, kind of almost required to be outgoing and social and extroverted. But as we move farther into our life and we get away from the workforce, we get toward retirement, you know, some of the more natural inclinations start to dominate instead of the situational inclination. So traits change, but they're more stable than, you know, just a bad attitude or, you know, I'm having a bad day, or even what's called a disposition. So a trait is something that has a biological component that it has some fixedness to it, but a disposition is something that I practice again and again, but there's maybe not that underlying disposition.
Mhm. Well, it's good that we can change over our lifetime. Hopefully, we are evolving more towards health and balance as we age. So, thank goodness, I'm glad I'm not a teenager or a 20-something anymore. So Ev, let's talk about why this matters. Like, why should we deal with this self-forgiveness? It's a long, hard road. Why is it worth it?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of science that's accumulated. In 2015, I was involved in a study that was headed by Donnie Davis of Georgia State University. And it was a meta-analysis of all the research on self-forgiveness. And some of the things that we found were like, you know, if people don't forgive themselves, if they really struggle and hold on to the self-condemnation, there's a fairly strong correlation with poor mental health. So the correlation over about 60 some odd studies was about 0.45. So that's a fairly strong correlation. Relationships are affected if we are down on ourselves. That correlation is less, and the number of studies on it was less. So that correlation is about 0.3. But still, 0.3 is a substantial relationship between self-condemnation and the impact it has on our relationships. So if I'm down on myself and feeling kind of cranky and angry with myself, it's going to show up in the relationships that I have. You know, no matter how hard I try, there will just be times when I'm a little bit down, and it's going to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially if they're ruminating, and that's what I'm talking about all the time. My loved ones might just get very frustrated hearing about that all the time. And is that why, or why does that affect relationships, Ev?
Well, I think that's one reason. Another reason is that it's just stressful for us to be down on ourselves all the time. We're kind of always fighting a rear guard action against that's negativity that's, you know, kind of got a hold of me. So that's stressful to always be fighting against something and trying to bring out our better nature. Uh, Assuming we want to bring out our better nature and not give in to the negativity.
Yeah, and just having that level of stress that might also just feel unnecessary. Um, um, and just that much stress in one's life, it affects all aspects of our life. It affects our performance and our sense of well-being and so forth. Yeah, and that bleeds into our relationships. That makes sense.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
As far as the, you know, well-being, it's not just the sense of positive well-being that it affects, but also it puts us more at risk for depression and for anxiety. And then down the road, not everyone who's depressed or anxious, of course, is at risk for harming themselves, but some people do. So it does increase the likelihood that people will do some kind of self-harm, whether that's attempted suicide or some other just bad decisions that affect us negatively.
Yeah, and that's so relevant, especially now that like it just I'm not sure this is true, but it seems like the suicide rate is been going up, and yeah, so all that we can do to improve our mental health is just even more important now than ever.
Mhm.
So why else does it matter? Ev, I think you had mentioned physical benefits as well, and
Right. I wasn't going to bring up the physical right away because it takes longer for the physical impact of being stressed all the time to show up in our body. So, it shows up in that I can feel that I'm tense. I can feel that my heart rate is elevated. I can feel that, my face is flushed. But that's not really my health. It's going to take a while before my health is affected. So, and also it affects what's called our heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is a ability to calm ourselves down at some point. So this is a kind of a technical thing, but heart rate variability is like when I breathe in, my heart rate speeds up just a little, not even a beat a minute, but it speeds up just a little. And when I breathe out, it slows down a beat or so. So if I have a wider difference between the in-breath faster heart rate and the out-breath slower heart rate, that really shows that my body is calming itself. If I can't calm myself, if the in-breath and the out-breath are pretty much the same rate, that is going to lead to a kind of a cascade of feeling stressed. So what we want is high heart rate variability, which is also called vagal tone. I'm sorry to throw these technical terms at us, but the vagus nerve is the nerve that moves throughout our body and calms the systems that get turned on. So a good vagal tone is a good ability to calm ourselves down. So one thing, if we are stressed all the time, because we are very self-condemning and we're ruminating on it continually, we keep ourselves with that very small margin of heart rate variability. We're not able to calm ourselves down. That's eventually going to take a toll on our body. So, that's an important concept, I think, in our health.
yeah, so there's just so many facets of this, how it can negatively impact us, and just sort of the overall result being like a decreased resilience and ability to withstand any, not any, but just additional challenges and traumas. And so by attending to these, this inner journey, this transformation and discovery and healing, it can really just set us up to be more healthy and resilient, better able to cope, not only in our lives and for taking care of ourselves, but also contributing back to the world, right? Because if we're not dealing with any kind of this kind of impairment, then it decreases our ability to also make the world a better place and to be masters of our world. So it seems like it could just be a downward spiral, and then more self condemnation. Well, why aren't I just pulling myself up by my bootstraps. And like when we gloss over it and why don't I just get over it? It just seems like we're doing ourselves such a disservice and we're just making it worse.
I think we can. It can make us feel guilty and condemn ourselves more. So it can become that negative spiral downward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's going to affect, all kinds of relationships, our work relationships, our social relationships, our love life, and plus the mental health and the physical health and maybe spiritual issues as well.
Yeah. So reversing that negative spiral into a positive one, really worthwhile. So this is WRWK 93.9 FM. This is Finding Our Fit. I'm Susanna Calvert here with the eminent Professor Everett Worthington, discussing the long, hard road towards self-forgiveness. And we would love to hear from you callers. If you have any questions or comments or experiences you'd like to share, things that have worked for you in your own self-forgiveness long, hard road. Love to hear from you by calling in at 804-464-1089 or pop something into the Facebook chat if you happen to be joining us from Facebook. So in the time we have remaining, Ev, as you know, I always like to talk about what can people do about this. How does one begin this long, hard journey on this road to self-forgiveness? And I know you always have such clear answers to this part of the show. So what do you recommend to me and other listeners?
Well, I think there are a lot of alternatives that people have that in trying to deal with self-condemnation. Some of them aren't the best alternatives. So one thing we can do is we can just let ourselves off the hook. I didn't do it. It wasn't that bad after all. Usually that is not going to be our best solution, because if I did something to harm or offend someone else, just letting myself off the hook is just going to enrage them and create more breach in the relationship. So, and that's going to come back and bite me in the end, that I may get rid of myself, of my self-condemnation for a day, but it's going to come back in spades as the relationship unravels. And so that I think that for responsible self-forgiveness, we recommend that before people even start trying to forgive themselves, they try to work on the responsibility. And that's going to show up in three places. The first place is to try to make things right with God, or try to make things right with, humanity, or, whatever I call sacred. So if people feel out of sorts with the things that they hold to be most sacred, they're not going to end up feeling at peace regardless of what else they do. So one of the first things they need to do is take this to some kind of to restore their sacred connection. The second is really important, and that is to, if I've wronged someone or hurt someone, I need to try to make amends in some way. And that's going to usually involve an apology, a confession without excusing myself, and then an apology that says, I am so sorry that I did this, a communication that I know that I've hurt the person, and so it's going to require empathy. And then often some kind of amends making, some doing something to kind of make up for what I've done. And then, that interpersonal kind of balancing of the books can be a step to get us on the right road. The the third thing for responsible self-forgiveness is I need to kind of take a moral inventory and deal with this psychological damage I might have done to myself. So now there's a concept that's closely related to this called moral injury. So this really developed in the wars with Afghanistan and Iraq, in which people who were on active duty ended up, often doing things that they found morally objectionable, witnessing things that they didn't intervene in, or just being in a really bad situation and not feeling that they did anything to get out of it. And so they feel that they've injured themselves morally. So that is a psychological repair that people, might need to work toward to kind of get ready for this step of trying to forgive ourselves. So, those three steps, we have these 6 steps to forgiving ourselves, but those are the first 3 steps, and those are like preparatory steps. And then the fourth step is to try to apply the same method to forgiving myself that I try to use to forgive other people. And that is to be able to make a decision that I'm going to treat myself differently. I'm going to treat myself as a valued and valuable person. Yes, flawed, I did something wrong, but I'm still haven't taken away all my value as a result of that. So I make a decision to forgive myself, and then I can work through a process to reach forgiveness. So I have that 5-step reach forgiveness process that's been investigated about 30 some odd times worldwide. We know that it works for most people, but it's R. So reach is an acronym. R, recall the hurt, but don't keep beating myself up as I recall it. E, empathize with myself in the same way I would empathize with someone else who's I know is fallible. A, give an altruistic gift. Yes, it's altruistic. I don't deserve to be, just let off the hook, but I'm going to give this altruistic gift to myself, and then commit to the forgiveness that I experience, so that H, I can hold on to that that forgiveness of myself when I doubt. Recall the hurt, empathize, altruistic gift, commit, and hold on. So that is like the way that people can forgive themselves. But I wish that were the end of the story. Unfortunately, it never is. And often people have a lot more trouble with the next part, which is trying to accept themselves. So I might have done something that I think is wrong, and I work through and I make a decision to forgive myself for this, and I work through the REACH, and I emotionally feel a certain amount of peace about that. But maybe I'm still struggling to accept myself. I can't believe I am the type of person who would do something like that. It's not funny, but I often joke that is actually what keeps psychotherapists in business, is helping people work on self-acceptance. The things that we do, that we all do, that we have trouble accepting ourselves as someone who would do that. So that can take a while. And then the last of those 6 steps is to practice living virtuously in a way that I don't repeat the same mistakes again and again. So I've gone on and on about this, but just to put it all together, so we take it to God, or whatever we call sacred, make amends with the people that have been harmed, deal with self-injury that we've done, reach forgiveness emotionally and make a decision to forgive, work on self-acceptance, even though as a flawed person, and then practice not doing this again, doing things, making better decisions next time.
Yeah, and this could be a lifetime endeavor, right? Right, Ev? Or is it like people work through most of it and then they might have little relapses or something like that, or they can, or something new will come up and they have to start over? I mean, can people like truly do, well, I guess with your reach model that they can work through it significantly. I mean, what percentage of people can actually really come to sort of a quasi completion of the forgiveness process?
Yeah, I think most people can get to a place where it doesn't bother them as much. And many people can get to a place where it will never bother them again. But, you know, a little exercise we use in our forgiveness groups is like to have people write a little, account of the wrong that they experienced on their hand, and then go try to wash it off. Well, many times they find that most of it came off, but some of it is still there. And that suggests I may have to do this again. I may have to do it again and again and again, as things trigger off the memory of this. So if this is a self-condemnation, it's like, I read a little analogy recently. Is actually about grief, but it really fits here. It's like when we lose something that was precious or someone that was precious, it's like we're in a box and we're a big ball of grief. And there's a little button over at the edge, and that's a trigger that triggers the emotion. And so this ball is bouncing around, but when it's early, it's bumping into that trigger 10 times a day. And then it gets to where it bumps into the trigger 5 times a day and 2 times a day. And then every once in a while, because the ball is shrinking over time as I deal with it in some way. But even if I get that ball really, really small and it's just bouncing around in that box, every once in a while, it might hit that trigger. And it pops up again. And so if this is self-condemnation as something that I did deep in my past, it shouldn't surprise me that, every once in a while it comes back unbidden. Where did that come from? It's just like the emotional ball ran into the trigger and something triggered off a memory of it. And instead of panicking and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm totally flawed, I can't get rid of this, I think, well, that's life. Let me deal with it right now. Let me try to run through those steps of self-forgiveness again. I thought I was done. Obviously there's a little bit of pain still in there. Let me work on that. So anyway, I love that little analogy. I thought it was really helpful.
Okay, well, I have a ton of questions still, Ev. Unfortunately, we have some time left. But in the meantime, we are WRWK 93.9 FM. This is Finding Our Fit. I'm Susanna Calvert here with Professor Everett Worthington talking about the long, hard road to self-forgiveness. Listeners, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a buzz at 804-464-1089. Or if you're on Facebook Live, pop something in the chat. Join the conversation. It's not every day you get to talk to a world-renowned scholar like Dr. Worthington. So let's see. I have a list of questions here, Eb. First one's fairly practical. I'm just trying to envision myself going through this process. And I know you have this wonderful workbook, and you're going to give the link to everybody soon. But it seems like some of these, like take it to God or the divine, that can involve some prayer. Making amends. Well, you need to just go talk to that person if you've wronged somebody, right? And then the reach model, and then the psychological restoration and that moral inventory of the psychological damage. I mean, recommend that people write this down in a journal or talk it over with somebody. Hopefully, if they can find a therapist these days, they can talk it over in therapy, if that's an option. I mean, what's the best way to go through these steps?
Well, of course, being a psychologist, I'm just going to weasel out on this. There's no one best way. It's what works for people. So, Jamie Pennebaker and other people who followed his work have found that writing, in a journal or processing things through writing is very effective for a lot of people. For other people, it feels like a waste of time. Talking with a therapist, not for everyone. Some people just don't want to reveal things like that. They'd rather work it out on their own. So, I think we just experiment around and we find what works for us, whether it's sharing with, going to confession, whether it's talking with our partner, talking with a friend, writing it down. Some people just can benefit by reading a book, and as they're reading the book, they're kind of processing it in their mind. So I don't think there's any one best way. They're just it's a life is exploring things.
So any and all of the above, whatever works for you.
See, I told you I was going to weasel out on that, right?
Yeah. Well, the answer to everything is it depends. And you can't
Exactly.
really be wrong. If only that were part of the multiple choice exams we all had to take.
Right.
The thing that I kept hearing over and over again is it is like, how could I be that person? How could I do that? And I guess it kind of goes along with some of those personality traits. So is it sort of, because it sounds like perfectionism to me, like I have to be perfect. And is that an extreme form of conscientiousness?
Yeah, I would say, when I talked about being a little too conscientious, perfectionism, is just kind of uber conscientiousness. And of course, the tendency then is to beat ourselves up because we're not perfect. So that's a catch-22 right there. So, it's hard to depressurize, to figure out how to disengage from that cycle of perfectionism. And it's helpful if we can do that and not continue to get wound up on our own kind of our own wheels.
Yeah. I feel like I had a period of my life where I had to go through this, and I'm not sure I would have. I didn't call it a forgiveness issue back then, but I read this book called "How Good Do You Have to Be" by Harold Kushner,
Mm-hmm.
and basically what he says is that that when we're having these beliefs about needing to be perfect, that we're pretty much putting ourselves on par with God, that we have to be perfect like God, but none of us are like God. I mean, we are all like God, but we can't be perfect like God. And so it's sort of an arrogance to think that we, can do that. And only God can be perfect, and we have to settle for being perfectly imperfect. And I also just love the idea about having room for growth, because if you're perfect, then you don't see room for growth. And it's like my house plants, where you never see the little green tips because poor things are, kind of on their own. And we want to be like that. We want to have green tips all the time.
Yeah, and I think for some people, Kushner's argument could be very liberating. And for other people, that can be just another way of, beating themselves up because I'm doing this again. Why do I always do this? So, again, it's like, recognizing that our wheels are spinning, and try to figure out how to, step on the clutch so that we disengage from that track that we're on, and give ourselves some space. So whether that's liberating, or whether I realize, oh wow, I'm getting into self-condemning, I'm trying to be less than perfect. Either way, we have to just kind of get away from that trap of the rumination again and again.
Mm-hmm. I had another really like a question I'm just dying to ask you, and that has to do with when maybe we do something, I don't know if I want to say it wrong, but we do something that we don't recognize as being wrong, but if we were to actually look at it objectively, we would be disappointed in ourselves. We would feel it's a violation of our values or our moral code. And so it's sort of like, just not like others can see it, but maybe we don't. So if that's the case, like if we're doing harm to others and we're not recognizing it on a conscious level, do those same downsides towards not forgiving yourself apply, and we just don't realize it? Or what's your view on that, Ev?
I guess I feel like we can, very rarely do most people just say, I am really going to do something dishonest and hateful right now. Mostly we're not thinking about it, and we do it. And then later we get back in reflection and we go, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. That's, I feel bad about that. So I think mostly, in the heat of the moment, we don't condemn ourselves because we think we're making the best decision. And it's only when we get time to reflect on it that we start to doubt our decision. So I think, great, that's the way people are, that, and we have this wonderful capacity to reflect on our own behavior and then to take corrective action. And that may mean making amends or going to God or psychological repair. It may mean self-forgiveness and dealing with self-acceptance. So, great, that's the way we are. And I just, when that happens to me, and it always happens to each of us, then we do the best we can to deal with the moment and the new moments as they come up. So, we've all experienced things that we've done that we look back and regret. And so those are the hard things that lead to self-condemnation often and need to be dealt with.
Okay, so until we look back and realize ignorance is sort of bliss, and we don't really suffer psychological harm because on a subconscious level we're not really processing that on a subconscious level. I mean, it's not affecting us subconsciously.
Yeah, if only we didn't have to live with people, we would be just terrific being oblivious to our own moral failings. But unfortunately, people who love us will often call us accountable, and that will bring on the period of reflection. So we can't really separate, oh, if I were just, ignorant of this, then everything would be great. No, everything isn't always great, because the people that we deal with will, our actions have an impact on them, and they'll bring it up often.
Well, and that may or may not stimulate that self-reflection. It could just cause conflict and blame.
Right.
And then I guess we would just continue on in our ignorance is bliss mode, right? Until we can open that up, huh?
That's right. But we pay the price of the lack of reflection, because it does damage our relationships. So then now we have relational pain instead of psychological pain, and that's going to lead to psychological pain. So
Okay, so we pay the fiddler either way.
exactly. If we are, do things that are morally wrong, and we think that they're morally wrong, then eventually it will have negative effects on us, I think. And so it pays to, reflect back, but not beat yourself up. Just take the actions you need to deal with it in a responsible way.
And I think I have time for one more question. So you talked about it is inadvisable to let ourselves off the hook. But is it a good strategy if it is a non-moral injury, like it's more, instead of wrongdoing, it's that wrong being, that we can just let ourselves off the hook if we didn't live up to our, maybe we might say objectively is that maybe an unrealistic standard. Is that a good strategy for those sorts of?
I think it is. I probably would throw in a few other things, like being able to accept myself and accept my failures, or when I think of letting myself off the hook, I really think of just like, well, I'm not going to deal with this. I didn't do anything wrong. A kind of a self exoneration. If we're exonerated, we're told that we're not guilty. But often we let ourselves off the hook. We tell ourselves, I'm not guilty, when in fact we know we are guilty, and we're just trying to manipulate our own, emotions. So I think, it's helpful to face up to the things that we do that we really deep down don't admire, and deal with them in a straightforward way if we can.
And I want to just throw in a comment in our last couple minutes here that sometimes we maybe do not do our loved ones a favor if we just automatically say, oh, that person is just being blah, 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 and it wasn't your fault. And sometimes helping people move into self-forgiveness mode might actually be a better, more helpful, even if it is a harder initially. So we have just a couple minutes left. I want to make sure everybody knows how to find your work and your free workbooks, and to also remind folks that we are going to be, we're in the process of developing Ev's workbooks for our educational platform. So you can also find it on an online interactive version at healingedu.org, hopefully in the near future. But Ev, tell people how to find your examples of your work and the workbooks.
Now, I've got a massive amount of free things on forgiveness, humility, patience, self-forgiveness, all kinds of virtues. And it's at everworthington-forgiveness.com. So if you go there and you check out some of the tabs, you can see DIY workbooks, and you can see groups, and other kinds of resources.
Well, it just speaks not only towards your talent and hard work and intelligence as a eminent scholar in your field, but also your generosity and kindness and practicing what you preach by making so much of it free and readily available to the world. So thank you, Ev, and I hope you will also follow us on at the Foundation for Family and Community Healing, because we're going to be so proud when we launch those modules for the world as well on a gift economy. We have a little more overhead than Ev has, so we do accept payment, and that we have other modules on knowing yourself, managing yourself, and managing your relationships, as well as navigating anxiety and the science of well-being or happiness, the science of happiness. So I hope you will all come check it out. Check out Ev's website and go on your Shiro's journey and do that often challenging but so valuable inner work so that you can transform yourself and your life and your world. So I think that pretty much brings us to the top of the hour, Ron, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ron for station identification and to thank Ev again for another stellar hour with us. And thank you again for coming on Finding Our Fit yet again.
My pleasure. Thanks.
All right, folks, wave to your fans. I'll close down this broadcast next week, same time. All right, maybe we'll have found our fit a little better. At least we'll have a chance. We can do the internship, right? We can do the internship and practice up. All right, enough of me. I'm going to head us back to the loop.